So if we stay with the running game, the other component in this is Justin Fields, and the way Nebraska set up the defense, and Joel Klatt outlined this and expects this to carry forward. The defenses are going to force the ball into the hands of Justin Fields as a runner. So Nebraska might have been doing defenses and teams a favor down the line, not necessarily themselves, but has Ryan I believe his name's Ryan Day. Has he addressed to the media? And I'm going to preempt this by saying I'm guessing no, because of what your feedback's been on how he answers questions.
Not on addressing, we don't hear anything.
Defense is forcing the ball into Justin Fields' hands, but they want to keep it out. How do they game plan to get the ball into the running back's hands and keep him down to 6 or 7 carries and not the 15 he had on Saturday?
I think it's really going to kind of be a week-to-week thing, depending on what the defense gives them at that point. And we talked to Josh Myers earlier this week, and he'd like to see Justin Fields take about a negative amount of hits. I mean, he doesn't want his quarterback being touched or whatnot. But of course, Justin Fields, the super competitor, he's going to go out and do whatever it takes to win. And we kind of had a chance to talk to him on the call today about his I think, 17-yard touchdown run with the spin move or whatnot. And I think it was Garrett Wilson who was in the back of the end zone, but Fields saw the green grass and went or whatnot. They're going to have to find some ways to get the running game to take some of that onus off of him for feeling like he needs to carry the ball. But, when it comes to anything structural or what the plans are going to be, we're going to be the last to know in terms of them telling us. We have some ideas of what's going on or so on and so forth. But, we go into last season and Fields had to carry the ball a lot again down the stretch, and Penn State was the second to last game of the season. I certainly remember how quiet that stadium got when he laid there on the turf for more than a second. It's I don't know. I mean, they're just going to have to keep growing, and we see more growth from week 1 to week 2 than any other stretch of the season, in my opinion. And I think now that they have 4 quarters of live action of where they weren't whistling early and not taking guys down to the ground and whatnot, I think we'll see some steps forward. Regardless of how good Shaka Toney and some of these Jason Oweh and some of these other guys for Penn State are up in their front 7.
Yeah, I'm going to say I agree with the panel that you don't want to put him in harm's way too much, but sometimes it's just too much to pass up. Like he saw in the red zone, he could throw the ball to Garrett Wilson for a touchdown, or he could keep it himself and get it in there just as easily. It wasn't necessarily easily. He had to bounce off a guy, but what he did, brought back memories of Braxton Miller, certainly against Virginia Tech. Justin Fields is a big, durable dude, and he was running over guys at one point. We all remarked, look at the vegetarian out there running over people. And, that was great to see, certainly. But, again, Penn State from last year brings up the memory that he injured his knee when he was tackled late in that game, and it did kind of cast a pall over everything that happened after that. They fell behind to Wisconsin. He went out of the Michigan game for a moment and, certainly wasn't 100% when they played Clemson. So it is a push-pull, no question. And I go back to J.T. Barrett. He would never run it against UAB or I'm having a real hard time coming up with bad teams.
You're big on UAB today, Steve.
Tulsa. Yeah, I'm big on UAB for some reason. In 2017, they played Army and UNLV. Those are my examples. Then
UNLV was real bad.
Yeah, Army and UNLV, and you wouldn't see Barrett carry the ball at all in those games. And then they get into a nut cruncher, and it's like 20, 25 carries for him. And it's like, they'd win the game, but is there a better way? And I think you're going to see teams back out of the box a little bit too. If they're going to complete passes at the efficiency rate that he did and have some bombs in there too, you're going to have to pull a hat out of the box eventually because he's just going to carve you up. And, Penn State only gave up 41 yards rushing or something along those lines. It was like 22 carries for 41 yards or 45 against Indiana. And, they had Stevie Scott. Now, they did sack Penix, I think, 3 times, but and 2 of those were Shaka Toney, who we brought up. I think that is something Ohio State's got to be concerned about, establishing the run in this game year in and year out. They usually are able to do it, but until they do it against a quality team, we don't know if this team's capable of doing it. But I see both sides of it. Tone, what do you think about the great Fields running the ball debate?
Well, I think he ran the ball last week because they needed yards on the ground because it was
they weren't getting them.
They weren't getting them, so they had to get them from somewhere. And as long as he could move the chains, that's great. I'd like to maybe see some more of the actual reading rather than just the straight handoffs that were getting blown up. Or maybe I think they ran a couple more RPOs then to kind of slow down the defensive ends in the second half. And there's ways to freeze those guys without actually getting him hit. But I also thought it was interesting. Josh Myers talking about how, they don't want him getting hit because teams kind of twist his ankles and grab at him while he's in the pile. Fields said today that stuff does happen, and he obviously doesn't like it. And Myers and the offensive line are going to be there as quickly as possible to make sure that it doesn't happen this year. So I think he probably took some shots against Nebraska. There were, I don't want to say dirty shots, but Ryan Day said after the game he doesn't think Nebraska is coached that way. If that infers anything into what Day thought of maybe some of those targeting calls and some of the other things that happened. So every time he gets hit, you're like, is he going to get up? Is he going to get up? And that's just part of the deal of having a quarterback who's going to run the ball 8 to 20 times a game. Last year against Penn State, I think he had like 21 carries, rushed for over 100 yards, but the sacks brought him back down to like 60 or 70. And you got to move the chains, and he can do that. So, you don't want him doing it against Rutgers and Maryland, but you do have to win these games.
Just about every time I hear Scott Frost talk, he basically is still in the process of weeding out players on that roster in that locker room that he doesn't want to be there. And maybe that's a little bit of that. I don't think that's the primary focus, guys twisting ankles and knees in the piles, but just that type of player and the guy that's not going to grind and doesn't think that they can win and just wants to show up against Ohio State and we stay within 20 points. He talks about that every time I hear the guy speak.
He even was talking about his kicking game and how it's going to be better because they got rid of guys from last year. It's like, okay. Dump some dead weight.
He was not left a very good cupboard, and it sounds like there were some old packages that were ready to be tossed at that point that they needed to clear out space. But the problem is that they just have not been able to get a footing in recruiting. They don't have a natural recruiting ground. They can't go in and recruit Texas and Oklahoma playing in the Big Ten. Prior to Scott Frost, they had this whole Calabrasca thing where they were going to recruit the state of California. Some of those guys made it. Some of them never made it. Nobody stayed really. So, kind of back to the drawing board. But credit him for trying to clean things up and turn some things around. But at some point it's going to be year 5 if he gets to that point. They're going to be all his kids, and then it's going to be him having to clean up his own errors and not what he inherited from previous administrations.